Hi, my name is Aster. It's been a while. I've been busy with moving and a new job and all good stuff like that. Anyway, over the weekend, I decided to finally check out Spellbound, John Lasseter's attempt to out-Disney Disney. Lasseter is known as the producer behind hits such as Toy Story and Frozen, and also he is known for less savory things. Anyway, Spellbound is about a princess whose parents got turned into big dumb monsters, and she sets off to break the curse. I tapped out about an hour in. This wasn't just because the target audience was clearly younger than the average mainline Disney film, though that was a part of it. It was also because the film lacked something crucial. The best way to explain this is by analyzing the centerpiece song of the film the way it was before. I should preface this by noting that the composer and lyricist here were Alan Menken and Glenn Slater. If you're watching this channel, you likely know that Menken is responsible for the majority of Disney scores from The Little Mermaid to Tangled, and Glenn Slater was his collaborator for Tangled. Menken is phenomenal, that goes without saying. He's a legend. You'd think it's foolproof to put him on an animated film about a princess. However, truly, no secret weapon can function on its own. So yes, I'm going to pick apart a Menken piece. Blasphemous, I know, but this is important. And it's really not about Menken. He happens to be the composer here, that's all. It's about the state of songwriting in this medium in general and how composers aren't being utilized to their fullest potential. That being said, stick around because I'm also going to be going over what does work and what we can learn from all aspects of this song. Now, if you really want to see how deep I can get into songwriting theory, here goes. This is going to sound a bit bizarre, but I'm going to start this analysis by looking at the title. Stay with me. The way it was before sounds awkward to the ear. This is likely because the three middle words, way it was, lack anything strong or distinct in their sound and smudge together because of it. I know, but this is the thesis and the hook of the song. And I get it, the theme of the film is going to play with that concept, how the way it was before isn't as peachy as it seemed. Regardless, I'll argue that there could have been a better way to phrase this for the sake of memorability. The way it used to be, for example, is the same number of syllables and from a purely sonic standpoint sounds more rhythmic. The way it used to be. You can do one of those little holds on it because the D of used and the T of to need a hard stop between them if you're enunciating both words. Plus, the rhythm of the phrase putting the emphasis on used hones in on a theme of a bygone past. The way it used to be. You're not even sacrificing the number of potential rhymes. I know that E is a hard syllable to belt on, but she never belts the hook, so that's not a concern. You could argue back that the way it was flows easier and allows for more control of the rhythm. That's definitely an argument, because songwriting isn't an exact science, it's theory. As for memorability, though, I can't say the way it was before or even the way it used to be is particularly inspiring. The words are too, characterless. They're not being put together in an interesting way either. Like, you hear the phrase, I can go the distance, and you understand there's a long road ahead. And while it's not the title of the song, There Must Be More Than This Provincial Life contains distinct language that reflects Belle's intellectual nature. The way it was before, as a hook, can be slapped on just about anything, seeing as 100% of stories involve a status quo being disrupted. The reason I'm saying all this is to provide a foundation for what I'm going to discuss. To frontload the moral of this video, it's that songwriting is filled with intangibles, and those X factors could be the difference between forgettable and life-changing. Okay, the song. I'm not going to comment on Rachel Ziegler's personality. That's not important here. Argue about it in your own time. She's a great singer and a great actress. I liked her a lot in The Hunger Games. She's definitely putting quite a bit of effort into the way it was before. You can tell by how she's changing her natural singing voice to come off as more childlike. I appreciate that, since many voice directors seem to forget that young teenage girls generally do not sound the same as 30-year-old women. The song starts with a quiet, high piano. That works. It's very twinkly, like stars. She's making a wish. It sounds starry. That works. Why? If I were to guess, we associate high sounds with small things and stars appear small and numerous in the sky. That and context. We've learned to associate this kind of sound with wistfulness, especially in the realm of a princess-based animated musical. This is the backing for the first stanza. Is that all we left behind? It sounds lonely, doesn't it? This effect is achieved by having the single instrument being about the same pitch as the vocal line, so they blur together. Pretty cool. Here's something else cool. The first two lines. Shattered walls, empty hallways. Did you catch that? There's a technique here that I'm not sure has a name, but I call it a tail syllable. This is when you go one syllable over the meter for the sake of momentum and balance. The two lines both had the same rhythm on their first three syllables, but the second adds a fourth. It even kills the rhyme for it. A less experienced version of myself may question why the line didn't go shattered walls, empty halls, but let's listen again. Shattered walls, empty hallways. Okay, now I'm going to try and sing it the quote-unquote correct way. Shattered walls, empty halls, empty halls, empty halls. Sorry about my singing voice, I'm not warming up for this. It just doesn't sound right though, does it? Like, my singing voice aside. The melody feels like it's been cut short, or like it's missing an extra note. The extra syllable created by hallways lets the melody finish in a more natural fashion. So, how do you know when to employ a tail syllable? Like, that's what you always ask. Oh, how do you know when to use this rule? Well, you just gotta know. And I know, that's an awful answer on my end, truly, but I also don't know what else to say. Sometimes you just gotta know. And that's a really important lesson for any songwriter to take away from this video. You can read all the theory books you want, but sometimes instinct is instinct. As the stanza goes on, I want to point out the stealthy rhymes.
Is that all we left behind? I recall how we used to be.
Walls, hallways, is that all I recall? There's another trick being used here, and it's another trick I don't really know the name for, so I just call it ear training. You can train an audience's ears to start picking up on certain sounds.
Better stop and take stock while you're standing here stuck on the steps of the palace.
By putting so much emphasis on walls at the end of line 1, we are now looking out for all other all rhymes. These words aren't being found at the end of subsequent lines, but rather in the middle of them. However, since we're subconsciously picking them up, they're more apparent, and that's great because the words do feel important in their respective lines. Is that all we left behind nicely summarizes the sadness, and I recall how we used to be sets up the next line in stanza. So great work, Glenn. Okay, so are there issues with the opening stanza? Well, yeah, unfortunately. The first 2 lines are descriptive and give us a good piece of imagery for setup, but the rest of the lines fail to capitalize on it. The language here just ain't it. Yes, the rhyme thing was very cool, but where are we, Is that all we left behind may not even be grammatically correct. I might be crazy, but I think this should be, is that all we'll leave behind, as in we will future tense, because this isn't over, right? They're not dead or anything. As for the following lines, recall doesn't feel particularly natural coming out of this kid's mouth. Remember is the more common word. Yes, the rhyme is cool, but
I see each moment in my mind.
I see each moment in my mind is fine, but nothing more. It's there to transition to the next stanza. It's functional. I don't just want functionality, though. From people this talented, I think it's reasonable to expect more. The next stanza adds a lower line of music in the form of a woodwind and finger-picked guitar. This grounds and balances the overall sound of the instrumentation.
Endless talks, celebration.
Okay, lyrics. Remember what we talked about in stanza 1 with ear training? Stanza 2 is training our ears on talk and walk, but then we get
most of all, there was love to spare.
All is even emphasized. We're meant to really hear this word. Sure, I've been much lighter on criticizing slants these days, but the problem is that you've trained our ears on the hard stop of awk. The softer ending of all isn't satisfying here. Not to mention we used all in a rhyme spot a few seconds ago.
And magic everywhere. We breathed it in like air.
Something about the delivery here is off. Talk singing may have been in order to better communicate wistfulness, think proud of your world. As is, the notes chosen here feel random. The melody isn't sticking with me, and neither are the words. Why do they feel forced? Would it be better if they were straight up removed? Actually, yeah, maybe. Most of all, there was love to spare, rest, but no one's there now. The 2 lines between those feel unnecessary, like padding. As far as the last line goes, again, nothing special, though I'm actually a bit confused by the melody.
But no one's there now.
This interval sounds neutral when you think it should go down to contrast the rising nostalgia that preceded it. Chorus.
With you there in your old familiar place.
What place? Can I get any description? Imagery? No? This stuff's important. It creates pictures that stay in my mind. Give me an analogy to work with. In Waiting for the Wings, another Slater song, there are several references to stage acting because that's the connecting thread of imagery. Here, though, we got
reliving every day back when my heart learned how to soar.
That just sounds awkward to me. It could be the meter, since every day back doesn't sound totally natural. The more I read this line aloud to myself, the clumsier it sounds. Clunky, even. By the next stanza, we've gotten backing strings.
If I could find the way back to the way it was before.
I feel like I've heard this sonic palette 100 times before. Something about it feels so generic, like if you told me to write a Disney I Want song with barely any context, I'd just give you this.
And we could be together there right now.
Once when I was 18, someone asked me to make a song for their visual novel they were working on with zero context. I just went for visual novel sound, and I got told it was too generic. And I was like, well, what did you expect? You gave me nothing to work with. That being said, I do like how the chorus ends by going back to a much softer sound, bringing back the piano riffs from the beginning, because she's back in that lonely spot.
If only I knew how.
Then it swells back a bit as vocals come in.
With you here.
The rhyme structure still sounds pretty good, like it did in verse 1, but
Now it's clear what I really need is what you gave me all along.
where is this coming from? Need for what? And how did you come to this conclusion through the previous lines? Up until now, the song has been about missing how things were before. Very few specifics were given, and there was nothing about lessons taught. She didn't describe her parents' traits. If she did, I could say that this line is referring to being inspired by those traits and living by their example. We transition to a bridge with more generic string backing.
The lessons that you taught me and all the plans we laid.
To continue from the last stanza, our protagonist starts with the lessons that you taught me. Do we get examples of those lessons? Of course not.
The winters by the fire and the summers in the shade.
This is better, said the 25-year-old about the legendary composer and lyricist. In fact, I'd argue the stanza could have started with this. She's saying what she really needs is the simple joys her parents showed her. I'd personally have liked to see something more descriptive or interesting than the generic cold winters and warm summers, though. Again, it makes the song feel uninspired. That's kind of the key word here. If the lyricist couldn't think of anything better, it means he didn't have anything to play off of. Think of context like a pitcher in baseball. If he's complex, his pitches will be hard to hit, but make for an interesting challenge. You'd have to be a great batter or a great songwriter to work with it. If the pitcher is simple, you can focus on patterns and get easy hits. If he doesn't throw near the strike zone at all, you can't hit anything no matter how good you are. At best, you get a walk, which to me is unsatisfying. Is this analogy working? I just like baseball. Happy baseball season, everybody. I'm trying to say that with simple yet focused context, there's a lot to work with. Defying Gravity has layered context, but Stephen Schwartz is fantastic, so he can make it a layered song. Empty Chairs at Empty Tables from Les Mis has a simple context, so the lyrics could go deeper into a single emotion. Somewhere in between, we get something like Epic 3 from the original Hadestown, which allows itself to get highly metaphorical. When the context is too vague, though, you end up with the way it was before. It doesn't know what to focus on. It doesn't feel like there's a solid through line.
Sleep on, can't be gone to where they belong.
Listen to that swell. So grand, so meaningful, so bland. And could the lyricist really not find a more impactful build-up sentence than "things like that must live on"? This is the climax of the song before the ending. If you're using instrumentation that builds up like this, use lyrics that match it. When a song is telling a story, I like to think that there's two axes it's working on. One axis is progression and the other is depth. Progression refers to the narrative's evolution, while depth refers to the detail and focus on a specific feeling. You're kind of limited here and can only put so many points into either, unless you're All Too Well by Taylor Swift, naturally. An example of an artist who goes all in on depth would be Lana Del Rey.
It's you, it's all for you. It's parliaments on fire in his hands are.
Her songs definitely prefer to explore emotions as opposed to tight narratives. Generally speaking, I Want songs go for more depth. There's a bit of progression in that the character may be realizing what they want, but the song is usually focused on the strength of the emotion. I can't tell what the way it was before is going for in that respect. The word choice is too shallow, and like I said, the through line is shaky. The final chorus isn't taking us anywhere new, but it's also not going deeper than the other chorus. The first says, "I want to go back to the good old days," and the second chorus says the same.
We'll spend one perfect day back in the way it was before.
And that's fine, I'm always a fan of focus, but you have to dig into these feelings to make the song memorable. You can't just have the character repeat the surface level idea at the end for Broadway points.
Maybe 3. Why keep score? The way it was before.
And yeah, this drives home the song's thesis, but it's a weak thesis. I don't want to be the guy that comes in like, here's how I'd write the song better than these seasoned professionals, because I absolutely could not do that if I got the same materials they did. It's a miracle the way it was before turned out even decent. This all goes to show that if you don't give your songwriter something to be inspired by, they will give you something uninspired in return. When clowning on Wish was all the rage, a lot of people, myself included, trashed Julia Michaels' songwriting. A lot of people lamented how she was a pop songwriter and can never write a proper musical number, as though musical theater songwriting is some secret esoteric art. But then we learned she was given nothing. Call me crazy, but I think with proper context and guidance, Michaels could have given us some good songs. Not spectacular, sure, but good. Without guidance, even the greats will simply fall back on what they know works, and that's boring. How can you come up with meaningful ideas when you're faced with a mediocre kiddie plot? It's a divorce story, sure, that's different, but the film didn't carry itself with the maturity that kind of plot needed. You look at a Disney Renaissance film and they all had distinct aesthetics and themes to work with. Spellbound doesn't. I'm a broken record, I know. I've been thinking a lot about this. You all know by now about things like trouble production and overbearing executives. That's not worth a conversation this time around. This movie did try to be at least a little bold, and it was made to be an answer to Disney's failures. Unfortunately, its reception was about as lukewarm as Boston in March. Getting Menken and Slater felt like Lasseter was trying to get a one-up on Disney, not trying to get a beautiful and inspired soundtrack. There is no silver bullet. You still gotta try. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, consider subscribing for more analysis on the intersection of words and music. Have a wonderful day.